they said, no, you have to sign. Okay, well then I do without prejudice or at arm's length, and that's that. But again, those things will take and dissolve your signature, so that it makes it essentially difficult or impossible for them to prosecute you on the basis of your signature. So that ended that thing there in New York, but what they did is they put me on international television, which went into Canada, and there somebody said, well, we know who that is, and one thing and another, and boom, immigration says, come on in, we need to talk to you. And so I went in, and with Cassandra, who was my fiance at the time, and I saw in their paperwork that they were trying to deport me. And so as soon as I confronted them about that, they clammed up and didn't want to talk about it at all. But I knew what they were up to, so I produced paperwork, and then I was in the thick of the battle. You had something you wanted to say? Oh, okay. So I was in the thick of the battle, and I called George Gordon, and I said, immigration's trying to deport me, and I'm using the City of Refuge statutes from the scriptures as my defense. And George said, wow. He said, you're the only guy I've ever known that actually applied to. And he said, defense strategy is brilliant. He said, I wish I would have thought of it. So, anyway, it worked, and I'm still here. They've tried repeatedly to deport me. And for those who don't know, the Immigration Service is pretty seriously arbitrary and pretty well focused, So, when they come across somebody, it's just handcuffs and deportation real quick. And anyway, I've been through a lot of different things. City of Garland jailed me 6 times, for instance, and never brought me to trial. And when I sued them, they moved to have me designated as a vexatious litigant. I was supposed to be a vexatious litigant. They're the ones that arrested me 6 times in a row and never brought me to trial. I mean, it was like, what's going to be enough? 60 times? 600 times? Anyway, I moved from Garland to Mesquite, both being suburbs of Dallas, and in Mesquite, they got a phone call from Garland. The Garland police told them about me, and so boom, 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 they arrested me 3 times in a row. And but they quickly discovered that they couldn't get a dime out of me, and I would sue them. And I had the judge from the municipal court on the witness stand in the Dallas County Court, and the detectives waiting out in the hallway, and Ty Hole works them up for 2 whole days, and all of that stuff. And they had their fill of it real quick. And so I would pull up to the intersection in Mesquite, and by the way, where I was staying was in walking distance of the police station. So it was like there's the beehive and the activity all around it. And whether I went to the grocery store or to anywhere else, post office, whatever, I would encounter several cruiser cars, at least one, but a lot of times many of them. And so I pull up in an intersection, and then the cop pulls up, and he looks, and he sees the Suburban with no stickers. And then he looks to see who's behind the wheel, and as soon as they saw it was me, the light changes, and he's gone. And the apparently the chief of police had put out an intelligence memorandum about me, is what I was told. I never got to see the thing. But apparently my picture and a description, and it was like, stay away from this guy. So, all of that. Anyway, in 1990, this is where it starts coming into a big lesson too. In 1990, Richardson Police, which is a suburb of Dallas, stopped me at a traffic stop, and they arrested me. And in the jail, they beat me bloody on the jailhouse floor. And then they discovered that they had nothing to charge me with. I'd been in a brand new Acura, which was basically just off the showroom floor, paid for in full in gold, and with the manufacturer's statement of origin made out to me, paid in gold. Now, some people might not understand that. I've seen some blank looks out there. Whatever car you got in the parking lot you might think is yours because you've been making payments on it, or you've paid it off, or you bought it used for cash, or whatever the case may be. It's not yours. All those cars out there have a state flag on the back and the front, and they belong to the state. You may have made the payments, but that's not your car. And you go to the dealership. The way this works is you go to the dealership and you say, I like that Cadillac there. And you come to an agreement on the price, you peel off the cash, they've got a bunch of paperwork to sign here, sign here, sign here. And they send the paperwork off to the state capitol, and the state capitol sends you a certificate of title, which means that title exists somewhere, but one thing we're sure of, you don't have it. You have a certificate of title, not title. Okay? So that car is no longer yours, even though you paid for it cash. It's theirs. But the way I had done it, paying for it in full in gold, their own legal counsel told them they couldn't touch that car. They had no charges against me. They were in a panic because it was not only false arrest, but also brutality, etc. So they went fishing for federal agencies, and they tried several. Guy came from U.S. Customs, for instance, on the issue of the Kruger hand in my pocket. And the thing was that was during the time of apartheid with Reagan and all. And the issue was, had I gone to South Africa and brought coins into the country unauthorized and in violation of the embargo, etc. And I said, no. I said, all you have to do is look at the date of the coin, and they're available in coin shops from coast to coast. That handled that real quick, but it got tough with the State Department. The State Department is the one who really took the bite. And so they came, 3 men in black suits and dark reflective glasses, and they picked me up in chains and irons. They bring their own, and they took me to the federal building downtown Dallas. And I was brought in on one charge at the time, forging and counterfeiting entry documents. And then later they added another charge, which was diplomatic impersonation. Now, those were 2 serious federal felonies. And my initial appearance in the courtroom, blood on my shirt and everything, and they were trying to process me. Well, I was at the time basically like a green recruit. And I'd never been in federal court before in my life, hadn't been through any of this kind of thing, and I was having to learn real quick in the school of hard knocks. I did tell the judge, the magistrate, I said, this is blood on my shirt from a police beating. He said, I thought it was dirt. And I said, would you like me to approach the bench so you could see his blood? He said, no, you just stay where you are. We're here about the criminal matters. We're not here about the civil rights issues. He didn't care, how badly they beat me or any of that. And anyway, I was denied bond. It didn't matter whether it was $1 million, $1 billion, or $1 trillion. It wasn't enough for somebody as dangerous as me. And so it was immediate incarceration. I was brutalized altogether in that whole deal. I was brutalized 7 times. Paramedics were called twice. I was dragged around through half a dozen different facilities in 3 different states, tortured and abused for 238 days, 68 days of which were at the infamous federal torture facility in Springfield, Missouri. And among federal prisoners, that place is well known. And people are scared of it because you can go there and never come back. That's a huge facility. They've got a medical wing, psychiatric wing, and a prison wing. The prison wing is basically slave labor to take care of the work in the other places. So, they did what they call a mental evaluation on me. Would you like me to tell you about mental evaluations right now? Because this is a tool that they use against you. At any time you start affecting them, like when they start getting anxious with the stuff that you're filing, or your abilities, or your knowledge, or anything like that, they'll say, so, the prosecutor or even the judge on his own will just say, there's reason to believe you may be mentally unstable. We're going to send you away for mental evaluation. Well, they've tried that with me, both state and federal, and I've defeated them on both. But in the federal thing, at the time, I didn't know how to do it. And I ended up in Springfield, but I didn't even have a chance to do it. Because what happened is, the prosecutor did up the motion. And a motion has to have at the end of it a certificate of service where the prosecutor says, like she did, that it was hand-delivered to me that day. I was in jail. It was never delivered to me. Okay? So that's a lie right there. And then she took it to a judge that was not the judge in my case, but a different judge. And had the order made up for him to sign, which he signed. And what it said right in the beginning, that it was unopposed by Mr. Fox's counsel, legal counsel. I had no attorney. So the documentation was completely bogus. Both the prosecutor and even the stuff that the judge signed were both bogus. And guess what? They never filed them in my case. They put them in a miscellaneous file so that nobody would know. Certainly I didn't know. But what happened is, 3:15 in the morning, the guard said, Fox, get your stuff together. You got a full release. And I thought, wow, my legal paperwork's done its job. I'm going home. And of course, they put me in the holding cell, and I'm going to be waiting for the U.S. Marshals to pick me up, and I'm sitting in my cell. I guess we have to go into the courtroom, and the judge has to bang the gavel and say, case dismissed. Okay, no problem. Well, they picked me up to take me to this facility where I was at, was a distance. It took them about, I forget, half an hour or something to travel back and forth. But that was only because the U.S. Marshals would do about 100 miles an hour. And in Colorado, they killed a bunch of inmates because they lost control of their men, and the inmates died. because of it. But they do that kind of stuff. They just go way over the speed limit. They don't care because who's going to stop? And if you're an inmate, if your family's depending on you coming home, you could be just dead meat in the ditch. They don't care. But anyway, so they brought me to the courthouse on the 16th floor in Dallas. They got these cages where they keep the people, and they bring them into court at the appropriate time. So I'm in the cage there waiting, and I'm figuring to myself, well, like I say, he has to bang the gavel and say case dismissed, and everything's good. So then one of the U.S. Marshals said, you aren't going home, you're going to Springfield. I said, what? I said, I need to use the phone immediately. And he's, no phone. And so they wrapped me up in chains and irons, and they took me to Love Field, which is not the big airport, but the small one. And they had an executive jet. They had some other prisoners on there, but me they put in the bathroom, all wrapped in chains and irons, over to Springfield. Nobody, my family, friends, nobody could figure out how I disappeared from Texas. It was gone, disappeared. Because the paperwork was in a miscellaneous file. Finally, a friend of mine went to the prosecutor and confronted them about the situation and got the information that I was in Springfield. Interestingly, they had me in solitary confinement at Springfield, and the way I got messages out, there was one guy, only one guy, who had the balls to talk to me through the crack in the door.
10 minutes.
And he was the illegitimate son of Lucky Luciano. And when I did get out of solitary confinement, he took me to a special area, and I was introduced to the Godfather, Fat Tony Salerno, in the wheelchair, the one who had called the hit on Jimmy Hoffa. Anyway, these are interesting people, and they only got about 1,000 times more integrity than the federal government. And so anyway, and actually we've remained friends, and they, at times, they called me to Vegas and set me up in a high-rise penthouse deal in a gated community in Vegas. And this was gigantic penthouse, the whole top area of the 30-story high-rise. And in the lower stories was Janet Jackson, Rodney Dangerfield, and others. But the penthouse, which was in magazines as being the most, outrageous and extravagant place, that's where they put me. and the place, you had to see it to believe it. It was like it was designed by Bob Guccione and Hugh Hefner. There's 2 indoor swimming pools in there, and one of them, it was like you exit from the swimming pool to a bed for 8. They were just direct, Anyway, that's all off to the side. But the mental issue, they will try and get you in court on a mental issue if you are raising a ruckus with them. And the way you handle that is best to have it. There's several ways. There's always several ways to skin a cat, okay? So the first and best one is get your own mental evaluation ahead of time by somebody who is in your favor, okay? So when you get called in on that, you just whip it out for your pocket and say, excuse me, I already have my mental evaluation by board certified so-and-so. However, Judge, I don't think that you nor the prosecutor have had your mental evaluation. So under equality under the law, we need to adjourn these proceedings until you gentlemen get your mental evaluations to be sure that I'm not in jeopardy from your craziness. Now we're not going to get their mental evaluations, but it would be the end of that conversation. And then, of course, if you get in a surprise attack like I was in, and they're going to, send you away anyway. Well, first off, you're entitled to a hearing. And in the state, they brought me into court. They had taken away my cane and they had me in a wheelchair and they brought me into the courtroom. And I'm facing what I considered the wrong way. I'm facing the jury area. And they had appointed a couple of public defenders. And so I turned to them and I said, are you planning on doing some sort of hearing like this? And they said, yes, this is a mental evaluation hearing. And that they were going to select the jury for this. And I said, wait a second. I haven't been given any notice. And I moved around in the chair, and the judge is at the elevated level up there. And I said, I haven't been given any due process, notice, and opportunity. See, the cornerstone to due process is the notice and opportunity. You have to have both notice and opportunity. Otherwise, they're screwed. So I said, I'm entitled to notice and opportunity. I said, I have my own witnesses to call, but this total surprise has deprived me of my witnesses, and I'm not prepared to go forward. So he's looking in his book, and sure enough, I'm right. And he said, okay, we're going to set this off. Well, I had people come in, and I had a whole bunch of witnesses, as a matter of fact. They got scared. They set the thing off again. And when people came again for me, they figured, well, this isn't going to work, just shuffling it along. So they said, okay, we're having the hearing. The prosecutor came to me and said, Mr. Fox, I'm not even going to cross-examine your witnesses. Okay? They had Dr. Grigson. Dr. Grigson was known in the media as Dr. Death. He laid away some 4,000 people. Well, I had 4 doctors and 3 other people to testify for me. And that was it. My friend, Dr. Tedford, had the jury literally laughing out loud against Grigson. It was the most resounding defeat probably in his entire career. So we're out of time for this segment. We'll be back with fun and excitement here shortly. So, with regards to questions, I think that Susie said that you could come up to the microphone and ask your question. We want to keep it to like the current topic, because we'll be covering a lot of stuff this weekend, and I may be covering what you might be about to ask. I may be covering later this afternoon or tomorrow or something. And if it's not the current topic, like say we've been talking about the mental evaluation, we talked about agency. If somebody had an issue about DWI, we're going to get to that. You had a question now?
I do.
Okay.
My name is Mark, and the question I have is with regard, you meant to Texas Rule 12,
Right.
talking about agency,
Right.
and if I understand it correctly, you utilize that in Texas. Now, can that apply across straight lines?
Yes.
State lines?
Yes, and it does on the principle that I mentioned before, and that is equal footing doctrine, or full faith and credit, which is in the Constitution, and the encyclopedias of law, Amjur and Corpus Juris, they cite cases from all kinds of states, okay? So you can use those decisions coming into your situation. Now, Texas is blessed with that one rule that makes it quick and easy. For some of these other places, they don't want to understand it. And you catch the difference here? They don't want to understand the issue. And so sometimes you basically have to hammer it into their head. And one of the things that will do that is federal crop insurance versus Merrill. And when we come back this afternoon, I'll give you the site and the information on that, okay? Because you've raised an important issue. And federal crop insurance versus Merrill covers that, and it's federal, okay? So, and in the federal system, boy, I'm telling you, they want to avoid this agency issue at all costs. But there's ways of pounding it into their head. And there was a gal here, and she's outside, Carla. Terry, you getting Carla?
You're in trouble now.
Yeah, you're in trouble now. So come and tell us at the microphone here what you were studying and what you think about it. You said it's huge.
Okay. I've been studying the agency, not the course, American Jurisprudence. There's two editions. There's the first one, which is the 1936 edition. That is amazing. I just started reading it with page 1. I have not been able to find it online anywhere, even at the law library. You may have to go in and just to the library and photocopy it or read it there. I don't know. It does differ quite a bit from the second one, but it's awesome.
And the topic?
The first one is less than 500 pages. It's 400 and something. The second one is 700 and some odd pages. But I recommend that you go back and study the first and then look at the case law, see if it's been overturned. I'm in the process of doing that, but...
Where do you get this book, Carl?
Law library. Downtown Phoenix. Or...
Yeah, you can buy it.
Yeah, probably.
It'll cost you a bunch of money because whether it's Amjur or Corpus Juris, you're talking 60-something law books, this thick. I mean, it'd be, more than the full length of this table of these books standing on end.
What prompted?
Isn't that so?
Yeah. What prompted me to study it is I'm trying to. I don't want to use the word represent because I know it has legal meaning, but I'm trying to get like a power of attorney for a couple people to be able to go to court in their behalf as a power of attorney, and I know the courts are going to shoot that down. And so I started studying attorney in fact, and they're still going to shoot that down, but that referred me to agency. And that's where my study for agency has come through. Attorneys at law are an agent. They are one type of an agent. They're a specialty agent. And it's a good read. I'm not very far into it yet, but I again recommend read the first one, the 1936 edition.
State the title again.
It's American Jurisprudence, the legal encyclopedia.
And your comment was that the thing is huge.
It's really huge. And it seems like it was page 19, and I can't remember the wording, but it basically says that you can be an agent for anybody, for anything. There's case law now under attorney in fact that says that you can, do whatever for someone as long as it's outside of court. And I just wasn't okay with that. I was not in agreement with that. And I knew that there had to be more. And so that's why I'm studying the whole agency thing.
Well, okay, thank you, Carla. It's interesting what Carla had mentioned there, and I will just fill in something here. Carla, I hope you're going to stay for this. The thing is that I have sat at the defense table in criminal cases in federal court in 5 different states: Texas, Oklahoma, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Florida. And it didn't come easy. I mean, it was a struggle in Florida. On the whole page, in gigantic letters in color, Judge Jordan is a liar, filed in one of the documents. And because he was denying me the ability to get into the courtroom and sit at the defense table. And after I called him a liar, I was sitting in the courtroom at the defense table. So, and in Oklahoma, it was another funny one, because the defendant is at the defense table, and he expresses to the judge that he wants Robert Fox to be sitting with him as assistants of counsel. And that's right from the Constitution, that wording, assistants of counsel. It doesn't say in the Constitution representation by attorney. Okay? It says assistants of counsel, and this is what he asked for. So I stood up in the audience area and proceeded to the communion rail, and I'm opening the gate, and the judge says, "One moment, Mr. Fox, do you have a license to practice law in the state of Oklahoma?" And my response was, "Neither the attorneys present here today nor yourself, sir, have a license to practice law in the state of Oklahoma." He turns to the prosecution and he says, "Does the prosecution have any objection to Mr. Fox sitting at the defense table?" And they said, "Oh yes, we object, blah blah this and blah blah that." And then the judge listens to their thing and he turns back to me and says, "Very well, Mr. Fox, you may sit at the defense table." Now, you all understand what he did? He deflected the issue. He had the courtroom was loaded, and if he would have said, let me backtrack for a second. He could tell from the way I was, and this goes back to what I said earlier, act as if, okay? He could tell by the way I presented that issue that it would be an incredible blunder for him to say, "Well, Mr. Fox, what do you mean by that?" And then it opened the floodgates, and everybody in the courtroom would hear how they don't have any license. Okay? So he didn't let that happen. He turns to the prosecution, and everybody pays attention to what the prosecution's objection is. And when they're finishing objecting, he says, "Very well, Mr. Fox, you can sit at the defense table." And so I've sat at the defense table in 5 different states, and I don't know anybody else who's done that, but there could be somebody out there, and but I just haven't met him yet. And with regards to the agency issue and the attorney issue, what what Carla's saying is correct. And to help you with your situation, Carla, one of the things that I do is I have a document, entry into the case. And attorneys are supposed to file an entry into the case when they get hired or whatever to do that, and they inform the court that they're entering the case. Well, I have my own document for that, and so I can get a power of attorney from the defendant and file my entry into the case and declare that I'm assistance of counsel and that I'm not there representing him. And I have done this kind of thing on many occasions, and one that comes to mind that's particularly interesting is there's a fellow, his name is John McGladdery, a really nice guy, and they hit him with 9 state felonies and 5 state misdemeanors, and he was out on federal parole and parole, and he had or probation. He had a previous federal felony conviction anyway, and but he hadn't really done anything wrong. And because it's easy to get convicted of doing anything. I mean, when the cop points the finger at you and says, you're silly in the no silly zone, or you're ugly in the no ugly zone, or stinky in the no stinky zone, you got it. You know, I mean, they'll convict you of anything. You know, so anyway, McGladdery was, I think, 7'3", and so the judge is elevated and typically is looking down on everyone else, but with McGladdery, he stands so tall, he's looking up at him.
Good.
And yeah, good. The prosecution would do something, and I had a pad, and I put an O there, and John would immediately, objection! And then I would whisper the objection in his ear, and he said, well, I object because of this, this, or this, you know? And so we conducted ourselves that way, and you know, the system was not liking it, but we won anyway. All his 9 state felonies and 5 state misdemeanors, the prosecutor met with us in the hallway. This was in Chicago. And the prosecutor met with us in the hallway and told John McGladdery point blank that he was going bye-bye forever. They were going to throw away the key, you know, because with the previous federal felony conviction and being on parole and this and that, you know, as far as they were concerned, it was a 3 strikes thing, and they were going to finish him off. But, you know, I worked with him on the thing. They were suing him not only criminally in the state, but also civilly. Plus, during the episode, he went through a divorce with his wife, a bitter divorce. And she wanted money, and it turned it around where he was, you know, challenging that to a reversal because she had the paying job and was making good money, and he had no job at all. So it was like, she should pay him. Anyway, the divorce thing was handled. The civil case was, we'll probably cover that one in a later session, but we prevailed in the civil case and the criminal case, the whole thing. So, that whole issue of agency, Carla agrees, is just huge. And there's things that you can do to help your friends in criminal cases. And Mr. Heitman knows about it, the amicus curiae. Yeah.
I heard the other day.
Have to turn the switch on.
A couple of weeks ago, I said, it's not on.
Turn it on.
Put the button.
Top. Towards you.
Yeah, I got the information about 2 weeks ago that they must have a warrant of authority from an authority higher than them. You can challenge a judge, an attorney, and the clerk of the court. None of them ever have a warrant of authority. And I haven't had a chance to check that out completely yet, but the person that told me that's now out of the country and he'll be back in a month or so. So I think he has the references, and I didn't get it at the time. I just was so thrilled with what I heard that it got excited.
That makes sense.
Turn off the microphone off.
Okay. So I want to wrap up that issue of the mental evaluation thing because they snagged so many people on that, and it blindsides them, and they don't know what to do. Okay, and it can happen to anybody at any time in any court case, and so if they ever snag you with that stuff, and they get past the due process notice and opportunity, where you're entitled to a hearing on this matter, where you can present your evidence and your witnesses to counter their accusation that you may be mentally unstable. Okay, and I did that successfully, like I say, against Dr. Grigson, who is known as Dr. Death. Well, if they get past that, and you are sent away to a mental facility, and like in the federal system, they had me whisked away, and I didn't know it was coming. Okay? If you end up there and you end up face to face with a psychiatrist or psychologist in one of their deals that, and they want to do a mental evaluation, and they could ask you, do you know what year it is? Do you know who the president is? To determine whether you got any functioning brain cells. Well, the answer to the thing right from the get is, I cannot be compelled to be a witness against myself. I'm standing on the Fifth Amendment, and I have nothing more to say to you. And you don't give them the time of day, and you don't agree that whether there's gravity or not. You don't agree to anything. Like, as I told you, I have nothing to say to you. I'm going back to my cell. And there was a federal inmate that called me in an emergency situation, and he was being whisked away to a facility on the East Coast. This is a guy from Louisiana. And he did this process that I just related to you, and he told the doctors and nurses there that he was going to be leaving shortly. And they said, no, you're here for a 90-day evaluation. And he said, regardless, he said, I'm going to be leaving shortly. And in a jiffy, he was gone. It's a slow process in the federal system with the U.S. Marshals, but it ended the mental evaluation thing immediately, and a few weeks later he was out of there, and he didn't have to put up with their nonsense. And what happens, this is such a dangerous thing, by the way, because if you'll recall the movie with Jack Nicholson, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he pretended he was crazy so that he didn't have to do work with a hoe or whatever as like prison slaves, and he was going to take it easy at the mental hospital. And everything was going great, and near the end of his time, he said to that black orderly that my prison time is up here shortly. And then the black orderly said, you're not in prison, you're in a mental hospital, and you aren't going anywhere until Nurse Ratched says so. And when he realized that, it was like, It's clearer in the book than it is in the movie, but that's a very serious thing if you slip into that deal where they can label you as being mentally unstable, and then they'll say, well, we've got medications to help you. Okay? And that's what they tried with me. The psychiatrist, I said to him, well, see, I didn't know this thing that I just gave you. I was a green recruit at the time. And so they had run some of their tests on me. And I met up with I'll just tell you, they treat you like kindergarten there. I was kept in solitary confinement for an extended period of time, and then only allowed out a little bit. And, till I could be out from 9 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, and go from my cell to the day room where I could watch television. but I had to be back in at 4, curfew, you know. 4 in the afternoon. And then I could stay out later, and then they would let me afterwards go to the cafeteria and stuff like that.
I got a comment on that. When you're in a ward, you have a guardian. What you need to do is to put in a denial of guardianship. A denial of guardianship kills one.
Okay, thank you. Which relates back to the agency issue, and I think Carla would agree to that.
Yeah.
And what was the other thing about that? It'll come to me. Anyway, so I met with this psychologist in the hallway after they were letting me out to go to the cafeteria and stuff like that. And I said, well, how am I doing? And he said, well, we have serious reservations about, you know, your reality contact and your mental stability. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, in all likelihood, you'll be back for treatment. And he said, what does that mean? And he said, well, we have medications for your kind. You know? And the thing is, I'd already seen that because they had guys that they had strapped onto the bunk wearing a diaper because they ain't going to the bathroom. They're strapped to their bunk. They load them up with thorazine, which is a chemical lobotomy. It's a chainsaw to the brain. And then when they were finished with these guys, they would be in the hallway and they were walking around, and it was like the night of the living dead. Their eyes were open, but you never saw such a vacant look. It was like the intelligence of a potato walking around on 2 legs. I mean, it's bad news. So what I'm sharing with you, you know, I hope you never even get challenged with such a thing. But if you do, you are now equipped to put the kibosh on that deal. Okay. One of the most important things that I could share with you is that in terms of powerful tools, this thing is an understanding of how this stuff goes. The only thing that counts, just basically from my experience, you won't find this in a book in Walmart, okay? The only thing that counts in that courtroom environment is facts put into evidence by testimony, okay? Now, if you watch court proceedings, the attorney speaks, the judge says, well, what do you have to say? You talk. And I've seen this time and again with people. And they talk to the judge, and the judge starts smiling, and they tell me that everything's going well. Okay? Well, the judge isn't smiling for that reason. And what is happening is they got one over on you. Right there. Okay? The only thing that counts is testimony. Facts put into evidence by testimony. So, if it isn't testimony, it's just noise. It fits in the category of burps, farts, coughs, air conditioner noise, and is just noise, regardless of what you're saying. And at the end of it all, after you've spilled it all out for an hour and a half, the judge gets to what? Make the decision as to whether he likes the noise from the attorney or likes the noise from you. And guess how that works out?
And an attorney cannot testify.
Exactly.
Kinsey versus Bigliero and a whole other bunch. Gonzalez versus Butts. Your attorney cannot testify, no matter what he says. That's the problem I have right here. The judges for 7 years have allowed attorneys to testify. you have to have a live body to commence a case and a live body to end it.
So that's exactly correct. It is Trinity versus Pagliaro. There's another case, and I'm going to give you the sites for these things, by the way, and I'll provide them to you in writing. There's another case called Government of the Virgin Islands versus Giroux. And what that case says is that the court, meaning in their vernacular, the judge, cannot assume facts not in evidence, even if he believes the facts to be true. If it isn't established on the record by testimony and evidence, then it doesn't count for anything. And I'm going to give you an example of this. It actually embodies several things. So, it occurs to me, I didn't cover the issue of what happened after I left Dallas, where I was for 25 years. Went to Jacksonville at the invitation of a wonderful gentleman, Dr. Barry Brooks, who's a dentist, and he had a large building there. It had 4 postal designations. There was frontage on Main Street and on the other main drag called Rusk. There were 2 postal designations on Main Street and 2 on Rusk. And his dental clinic was up on Main Street, and he made available to me an office that was on Rusk and the far end of the building from him. The day came when he came running into my office and said, "Robert, U.S. Marshals are here and they're taking me away." Well, I knew where they were taking him, to the Tyler Federal Court. So I picked up the phone, called a lady there in Tyler, said, "Please get into the courtroom where Dr. Brooks is and give me a report." So after a while, the woman calls and she says, U.S. Attorney Alan Jackson stood up and said, "Dr. Brooks, left to his own devices, will practice dentistry without a license. He needs to be incarcerated immediately." This is very interesting since it's a federal tax case. What's that got to do with dentistry? Well, anyway, that's what he said, and or that's what the report is anyway. So then Dr. Brooks, who walks a closer walk with our Savior than anybody else I know, he is kind and generous. When I was in the county jail in the rec area, people would come up to me and they told me point blank that they knew I was innocent. They knew Dr. Brooks, and that Dr. Brooks had taken care of their dental needs for free. He did discount dentistry for everyone, and for the poor he did it for free, and he even sought out opportunities to do it for free. He's that kind of guy. So, but he is meek, mild, polite, non-confrontational. He doesn't like adversity, so he doesn't say anything. Well, in my estimation, big mistake. But he doesn't say anything, so then the judge says, "Well, Dr. Brooks, guess we'll put you in the Smith County Jail." And he said, "Well, I don't want to go to jail," because now he's getting it, "Well, I don't want to go to jail." And the judge says, "Well, Dr. Brooks, people in your position, they don't want to go to jail, but that's just the way it is. You're going to jail." Click, click with the handcuffs, and the U.S. Marshals take him away. So I said to the lady who was reporting this to me, I said, "Did anyone testify?" She says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Did anyone come in, raise their right hand, get sworn into the thing, and go to the witness stand and testify?" And she says, "No, nobody did that." I said, "Uh-huh." So I wrote up an amicus curiae affidavit Amicus curiae simply means friend of the court. Okay?
How do you spell that?
A-M,
ICUSCURAI.
E.
IAE.
Yeah.
Wait, CURAI.
We'll give it to you. I'll provide it. So, amicus curiae. And so, in this amicus curiae, I pointed out that the judge had been assuming facts not in evidence, contrary to Government of Virgin Islands versus Giroux. Now, that particular case is not only a published case in the law books, but it's also in the federal evidence books. It's an outstanding case because the judge was informed by the bailiff of certain things, and the judge had this bailiff for like 15 years, and they had a trust relationship just like you have with a good friend. And so the judge had been informed of certain things and proceeded on that basis, but they weren't in the courtroom. There was nothing on the court record, and there were no facts in evidence put there by testimony, and that's why they made a big issue in that case. And so this is exactly what was happening in Tyler, Texas, in the federal courtroom with Dr. Brooks, assuming facts not in evidence. And then I said, well, and the bad part about it is that Dr. Brooks was deprived of his liberty. And the way that they were doing it was in the nature of man-stealing, Exodus 21:16, for which the Bible says the punishment is death. And then I went on to make an offer of proof, and an offer of proof is a very powerful tool as well. And I made an offer of proof that Alan Jackson, the U.S. attorney there, was a mental incompetent, a criminal in criminal enterprise, and a satanic minion practicing idolatry and child sacrifice. So I was speaking to a group in California, and the guy puts up his hand and he says, well, Mr. Fox, are you telling us it's okay to lie in an affidavit? I said, oh, you think it's a lie? I said, give it to me for a few minutes on the witness stand. I can prove up all of it. So, I mean, he pays his taxes, doesn't he? And allegedly in their system, they have this belief that the taxes go to pay for federal agents and so on. And there were 17 little children in WACO that died with no due process, not a day in court, and they were incinerated, etc. So they were like passed through. Their seed was passed through the fire to Moloch in a ritualistic burning. And he paid for it. Now, you know what happens to you if you pay to have somebody murdered? The same penalty falls on you. It's called the law of the parties. You know, when the guys go to rob the bank and you drive the getaway car, the fact that they killed 2 security guards and kidnapped the bank president, those charges of murder and kidnapping fall on the driver of the getaway car too. You understand this concept? So